Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this month's book to film adaptation. We'll be looking at Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. Seeing as we did the second book because it was the first film, so now we're doing the first book as the second film. Now, the book was released in 2000. It was then adapted to screen in 2009 with the lovely Tom Hanks playing the title role of Langdon. So I will always be looking at three things: how good is the film, how good is the book, and how well does the film take from the book. Now, I won't be discussing any spoilers for the book review or the film review, but I will be discussing spoilers obviously once we get to the sort of the plot, as it were. So the film, I mean, again, like with the first film, I'm not a huge religious person. So, you know, all the sort of like ins and outs of like the Vatican and the Pope dying and, you know, who gets elected next and how that works and, you know, doesn't really intrigue me, but I love puzzles. And essentially this is what the core of like Dan Brown books and films are puzzles. And I love Tom Hanks. He's a great actor. And watching him as Langdon try and figure these puzzles out and go through the whole of Rome basically against the clock to save these cardinals who are sort of like the ones that they think might be the next pope, watching him kind of like, you know, get all this information and go, right, okay, well, and basically following the path of the Illuminati. So the plot is the Illuminati have killed the Pope. They have then planted an antimatter bomb in the Vatican. And no one knows where it is in the Vatican, only that it's been planted in the Vatican. Because at the beginning of the film, you had antimatter being sort of like stored, and then you had the Pope dying. And then Langdon's brought in to basically, because the Illuminati said that they were responsible for killing the Pope and all of this. So he's brought in because of the Illuminati angle, because he's obviously, he's clued up, essentially. Like, that's what he does. He's a symbologist. He knows kind of these things. And then you've got Miss Vetra, who's brought in because she's the one who the antimatter was stolen from. So she knows what, like, how to handle it when they find it and how best to sort it, basically. And it's those two kind of like trying to go throughout the whole of Rome to and then obviously we find that the cardinals have been kidnapped, so he's also trying to find the cardinals before they get killed and the stroke of each hour. And it's just a fun adventure film with like some puzzles thrown in. So when you take out like the whole, you know, the whole religious aspect to it, I think it's like I find it so much more enjoyable. And I think obviously everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I will never bash anybody that believes in God. You know, if you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian, Mormon, I was a Mormon once, like, it's not, you can believe in what you believe in. I don't believe necessarily that there is a God. So when I take my mind out of that and go, do you know what, it's just a fun adventure film, I thoroughly enjoy it. I don't know if you're religious, if you might not enjoy it as much, but I mean, it is what it is. It's been out since 2009, and if you've not seen it already, I would definitely recommend giving it a go, because it's a fun kind of film to watch, and you're trying to figure out the puzzles with him, and you know, I enjoyed it. So it gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Now the book, I mean, I love Dan Brown's writing. I genuinely do. I had all these books when I was younger. I lost them, and so my husband has kind of been rebuying them for me, which I think is really, really sweet. And I still love them when I read them. I mean, they're a hefty chunk. I don't remember them being as hefty when I was a kid. I'm saying kid, when I was like a teenager, not a kid. I mean, I'm 30 now, so that's what, like half my age. But I still enjoy the writing style. I still enjoy, you know, I love how he comes up with these ideas as well, like the Illuminati. Same premise as well in regards to sort of like, you know, the Illuminati claiming there's an antimatter bomb. And with this antimatter bomb, when it goes off, so it's undetectable because it's not got any metals in it. And when it goes off, it will basically annihilate Rome. So they've got to find it quick. But it's really good how he kind of like pulls all the information together. He gives you little hints here and there, and I enjoy reading them, because again, it's more like a puzzle book for me sometimes, because this is why I like reading whodunits, because with the whodunits, your mind's working, you're going, okay, so they mentioned this, they're gonna come back to it, but if they've mentioned this, then this is what this is, and you know, And I just enjoy the plot. I enjoy the characters. I enjoy the way that the story progresses. I don't feel like, I've never felt like there's been anything that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So when I'm reading books, sometimes I'm like, oh, why have they added this in? Like, it seems excessive. But when I'm reading his books, I feel like, okay, I can see how this is moving the plot along, and it doesn't seem like it's unnecessary. So I do enjoy the book, and honestly, I love rereading it. I'm so grateful that Michael got it for me again, and I would definitely recommend that you give it a go. I mean, you know, it's a 9 out of 10 from me. It will not be a 10 out of 10, only because as much as I enjoy it, it's not one of my favourites. It's not unputdownable, if you know what I mean. Like, I can read it, but I can also put it down and come back to it a couple of days later. The books that I love and have to finish, they're kind of my 10 out of 10s or my 5 out of 5s. But yeah, so I guess like a 9 out of 10 from me. So it is an enjoyable book, and the plot is pretty much, you know, what I discussed in the film, and I love the way it ends as well, and I love the kind of conclusion, and I love the little bits here and there that he drops in that when it finally comes together, you go, ah, that's why he said it. Right, so spoiler alert. So if you have not seen either the film or the book and you want to read or watch the film or the book first, please turn off the review now and then come back to it later. So I will discuss the plot. I won't discuss it in as much detail as I used to, but I will kind of discuss the key points that are both in the film and the book, and any key differences that there are. So the book starts with Langdon being hired by the scientists as one of their own was killed and branded with the Illuminati sign. While this is happening, we're also getting a view. So we get viewpoints of the assassin, who is a lot crazier in the book than he is in the film. We get viewpoints of the assassin a lot more in the book. The film, however, starts with the most recent Pope being killed, and the Hadron Collider creating antimatter, and the scientist being killed as well. And then that's how it starts, is with the scientist and the Pope being killed. Now, in the book, Langdon meets Miss Vetra at CERN, so CERN, while looking at the dead body, who is basically a father figure to Miss Vetra. He kind of adopted her when she was in an orphanage. But in the film, he meets her in the Vatican, as she's been called there by the canister that's hiding under the thing. So far in the book, he's been hired by CERN. He's paired up with Miss Vetra. They've flown out to the Vatican because of the antimatter and the missing cardinals and all of that. In the film, he's already in Rome because he's been called in because of the Illuminati symbol that's been branded, you know, and a letter and all of that. And she's been brought in because of the antimatter, and then they meet. Now so that's all that. So now in the book as well, now they're both kind of back in Rome, we learn of the Pope's death, as it were. And in both as well, we've learned of the disappearance of the 4 cardinals who are favourites to be the next Pope. Now, in both, the head of the Swiss Guard is reluctant to admit that the antimatter is even a threat, but Vetra and Langdon convince the Chamberlain, who's like the acting Pope, as it were, because until a next Pope is elected, there we go, and he agrees that the Vatican should be evacuated. But as it's conclave, and that's when a new Pope is elected, the cardinals should not be disturbed. And the cardinals say, no, we're going to carry on. So basically they're now saying, we're not going to evacuate, even though we should evacuate. You just find the missing antimatter. Now, in both, we've now learned that the Illuminati agent has taken the cardinals and will kill one each hour from 8 o'clock until the bomb goes off at 12. So now Langdon's in a race against time, basically, to try and figure out the path of illumination, to figure out where these cardinals are going to be killed along the path. So in both, Langdon and Vetra go into the Vatican City archives to locate a document by Galileo that will show them the path of illumination. And hope, every time I say illumination, all I'm thinking of is the little minions, illumination, don't know why, and hopefully help them save the cardinals along the way. Now, in the book, the assassin, so this is again a whole little subplot that was not in the film, which actually, do you know what, I liked it in the book, but I'm glad they didn't include it in the film. So in the book, the assassin, or the Hassassin, so it's a H at the beginning, has given the scoop about the cardinals to a BBC reporter, who will then sort of dog the steps and get the scoop along the way. This never happens in the film. So every time, you know, so the BBC reporter will be throughout the book, not in the film. Again, I'm happy with that choice. So in both, Vetra rips the page from the folio because they've not got time to figure it out, and they head out to the church. However, in both, they head to the wrong church first of all, and it causes the first cardinal to die. Okay? And he dies by earth. So it's the 4 elements that they're killing the cardinals by. So he dies by earth, where he's basically branded with the earth symbol, and he's buried up to his neck, essentially. Charming. So they've now found the first cardinal. Now, as I said in the book, the BBC reporter is being given hints and tips as to how to follow the murders. So now in both, due to the missing 4 cardinals, the vote is still null and void, and the conclave continues. So the vote will be null and void pretty much the entire book and film until the end. So in both, they follow the path of illumination to St. Peter's Square to try and save the second cardinal. However, they are unsuccessful, and the second cardinal dies by air. So his lungs are punctured, so when they try to give CPR to the second cardinal, basically blood is squirting out of his body because his lungs are punctured. And again, he's branded with air. Now, in the film, they're managing to keep this quiet about the cardinals being murdered, and they're managing to basically say that the person that died in St. Peter's Square was, you know, just a reveller and not a cardinal, and blah, 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 blah. In the book, everybody knows what's going on, and BBC have the scoop. So, Vetra and Langdon are now split in the book, and the BBC broadcast has broadcasted the death. But in the film, Langdon and Vetra get split after the first death. So Langdon goes off on his little path of illumination, and Vetra goes back to try and figure out where this antimatter is being hidden. Now, in both, we now learn that the Pope was actually murdered with an overdose of his medication. In the book, it's via the media who get told, and then the media come to Vatican City and say, is this true? In the film, it's from a letter with the dead cardinal. But in both, Vetra has confirmed that the Pope was killed by his medication. So now in the book, the head of CERN has Vetra's dad's journals and starts reading through them to try and figure out what's going on. In the film, Vetra has them, and as she's trying to read through them and figure out what's going on, the head of the Swiss Guard confiscates them and locks them in his drawer. So in both, if you're keeping up, well done. In both, Langdon has gone back to the archives for the next step. The power has been cut while he's in there. So he's basically suffocating in a sealed vault, and he escapes by breaking the glass with the shells that are in there. In the film, he has a guard with him who he also saves, but in the book, this isn't the case. However, in both, my heart breaks because I used to work in the archives of a military museum, and the idea that someone would be destroying all those classic works. But I get it. He's trying to save his life, so I'll let him off. But now, in both, Langdon has figured out the third clue, and off they go. And the head of the Swiss, so you've got the head of the Swiss Guard and the acting Pope is now arguing again in both about evacuating. Head of the Swiss Guard going, it's not necessary, we're absolutely fine, we've looked after the guys for years, we're fine. And the Chamberlain going, no, you need to evacuate. So in the book, it's Vetra, Langdon and the head of the Swiss Guard that head to the third marker. In the film, it's the person that called Langdon to Vatican City, and he goes in with a load of men, but there's no Vetra. Now, in both, the Cardinal is still alive when Langdon tries to save him, but is unsuccessful. And he is almost killed by the assassin. So this happens in both. In the third Cardinal, it's fire. So he's basically being burnt alive with fire imprinted on his chest. So in the film, everybody but Langdon is killed. In the book, the head of the Swiss Guard is killed, and Vetra is kidnapped by the killer and basically taken back to the killer's lair. I tell you, this killer is just a psycho in the book, but in the film, he's just hired. That's all he does. So in the book, as I said, the killer is more primal. He truly believes in the cause as well. But in both, the Chamberlain breaks conclave to alert the cardinals what is happening outside the walls, and apparently that never happens. You do not break conclave ever for anything. But he's now done that, so to let them know that basically cardinals are being killed, there's an antimatter bomb somewhere on the premises, and so on and so forth. However, in the book, when this happens, there is a BBC reporter with him as well who televises the information to the whole world, and the Pope, the Chamberlain, gives a really rousing speech about how you just need to believe in your faith, and it's not, you know, it's not like a place, it's true faith and all of that, and, you know, it's a good speech. So in both, Langdon figures out where the fourth cardinal will be killed and gets there as the assassin is in the process of killing the cardinal. Now in the book, a fight erupts between Langdon and the assassin, and in the film, which means unfortunately the cardinal dies in the book, and the assassin gets away, and Langdon is basically sat there going, well, at least I'm still alive. In the film, Langdon actually does save the cardinal as the assassin disappears. Now in both, Langdon figures out where the lair of the Illuminati actually is. And in the book, he goes alone. In the film, he has more of the Swiss Guard with him. So he's, at this stage in the book, he's kind of on his own trying to save Vetra. In the film, he's got a whole kind of load of people, and Vetra's with him as well in the film. So in the book, Langdon and the assassin fight again. Vetra gets herself free because obviously she's been kidnapped. And they basically kill the assassin together. In the film, the assassin makes it clear he was hired. He doesn't want to kill Langdon. He's had plenty of opportunities to do so. He's not bothered about that. He's done what he's come in to do. He's done what he's been paid to do. If they pass meet again, he will kill them, but he just walks away. So Langdon and Vetra let him go, because I mean, why would you? Why would you be like, no, I'm gonna pursue you on principle, even though he's clearly a lot more skilled. So in both, Vetra and Langdon then figure out that the Chamberlain could be in trouble because there's the 5th Illuminati symbol. And so they use the secret passage to get back to the Vatican. Now in the book, Kohler, who's the head of CERN, has flown in because he's read something in the journals and he demands to speak to the Chamberlain alone. In the film, it's the head of the Swiss Guard, who's still alive, spots something in the journals and does the same and demands to speak to the Chamberlain alone. In both, the acting Pope screams, and when they break in, they shoot the person that's in the room with him. They also shoot someone else as well that's kind of being like, hang on a minute, no. And he's been branded with the Illuminati symbol. So in the book, the Chamberlain is now heading to the helicopter to go to the hospital. However, he seems to then just suddenly lose all sense of who he is and runs back into the Vatican. In both, at this point, he helps Vetra and Langdon actually find the antimatter. So in the book, it's almost like he's been spoken to by God. And then he goes crazy and he runs back in and he seems to find it. In the film, he just kind of, he apparently, the person who is part of the Illuminati that they shot told him. So they now find the antimatter. And then they realise that they don't have enough time to switch out the battery in the film or to get it safely back in the book. So what happens is the Chamberlain takes it into a helicopter and goes up in the sky to basically destroy it. Now, in the book, Langdon jumps in with him, but in the film, he's alone. So in both, the Chamberlain jumps from the helicopter and survives the antimatter blast as he goes off in the sky. In the book, he leaves Langdon in the helicopter and he's like, sorry about this, mate, and jumps out with a parachute. Langdon then kind of jumps off with a tarpaulin and he does survive. He's got 9 lives, that guy, honestly. So in the book, Langdon hears a recording that the head of CERN had made of what happened in the Pope's room, what actually happened, the conversation that did happen. In the film, Vetra and Langdon are viewing what happened in the Pope's office from CCTV that's in the head of the Swiss Guard, in the Swiss Guard's office, because he's now dead. Now, in both, it's clear that the Chamberlain is behind everything and set everything up to happen as he despises the way that science has overtaken the church and the fact that antimatter is considered the God particle. And he hated the fact that the Pope was starting to back science and thinks that science and the church should become more as one. Now, in the book, apparently it all kicks off because the Pope is actually the Chamberlain's biological dad. But not because he had sex with the Chamberlain's mum, but because they did sort of like a sperm donor-ish kind of situation where it was like immaculate conception, basically. She never lost her virginity. He never lost his either. So in both, the Chamberlain sets fire to himself instead of facing his sins, essentially. In the book, it's in front of the crowd, like the whole crowd that are out in the square. And in the films, it's within the crypt. So in the book, the last cardinal, Mortati, I think that's his name, becomes the new pope. Because obviously he's sort of like, everybody looks at him and goes, you know what, you're probably the best option. In the film, it's the 4th cardinal who survived because, you know, he was one of the ones. Well done. But they both end with Langdon getting the Pope's thanks and a sacred text on long-term loan to him, and then things basically are returning to normal. So the main storyline is kind of the same. The race against time is the same. You know, the missing cardinals, the antimatter, the explosion, the fact that the Chamberlain is behind it, the reason why, that, you know, I mean, they took out the whole "he's my dad" situation, which I was kind of grateful for. They took out the whole of the BBC press knowing everything. Again, I'm really grateful for that. They also kind of removed the involvement of CERN as much, which I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they put everything to the Swiss Guards. But, do you know what? It was, that, as many people say, there's book narrative and film narrative. And I wouldn't say it's a bad adaptation in the respect that it had enough of the main plot for it to be enjoyable. And as I said before, I enjoyed both the film and the book. But in regards to sort of like how much it actually did take from the book, I'd say a 4 out of 10. Because it did miss a lot of the key points and it changed things. And again, I am glad of the stuff that they did change, like the assassin being an absolute psychopath in the book, but in the film he's just basically hired. I liked that sort of thing, but the deaths are different, you know, who survives is different, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's a 4 out of 10. Now, obviously, if you agree or disagree with anything that I'm saying, please let me know below in the comments. If you do enjoy any of this, please, again, let me know in the comments. If there's any book to film adaptations that you would like me to do, leave below in the comments. And don't forget to click subscribe so you're alerted whenever a new video comes out. But thank you so much for your continued support, and remember to always keep it contento.